Are you aware of the power of press releases? With me today is Mickie Kennedy, the mastermind behind e-releases. He disrupts the media landscape by helping small businesses construct compelling stories to captivate journalists and gain the visibility they deserve.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Mickie Kennedy, the founder and president of e-releases, a leading press release distribution service with 24 years of experience, is a valuable resource for entrepreneurs. His expertise in helping small businesses enhance their visibility and credibility through press release distribution can significantly benefit entrepreneurs like you looking to promote products or services. Mickie Kennedy's insights can assist you in understanding the power of effective PR strategies, ultimately enabling you to reach a wider audience and build trust and recognition within your respective industries. So, Mickie, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
Welcome. Before I get into questions I have for you on this topic today, I'd love for you just to share your story and how you got involved with PR in the first place.
Right. So I guess about 28 years ago or so, I was finishing up a degree, a master's of fine arts in creative writing with an emphasis in poetry. And my career plan was to wait tables by day and write poetry at night. And so after graduating, I did that for a summer, and I just realized I hated being on my feet, 10, 12-hour shifts. And I felt like psychologically at the end of the day, there was no way I was going to read or write anything. So I decided I needed a safe office job. So I got hired at a telecom research startup as employee number 3. And because my resume had writing on it, they thought I would be the person to figure out press releases and to send them out to the media, which I did. And I got really good at it. I saw that people could take a press release, send it out, and get picked up like in The Economist or Financial Times or the Washington Post, which we did. And it was amazing. And I just said, why aren't more businesses doing this? Because it was generating, a ton of traffic, a lot of sales, and just recognition throughout the telecom industry. And a thing that I noticed a pattern was I was faxing at the time, and I would fax to all these journalists, and then I'd get a few phone calls saying, hey, there's a lot of numbers there. Could you just email it to us? It's easier to work with email. And that was the light bulb for me that said, email is a natural progression where things are moving, electronic transmission. And I just started contacting journalists in my downtime and just asking them if I could send them press releases on their subject. Originally, I was going to pick the e-commerce and high-tech field, but I would talk to someone and they'd say, oh yeah, I just got switched into, science, or, I'm doing fashion or something. So I was just like, sure, all industries, sign them up. And so about a year after that, I had about 10,000 journalists in my database, and I launched e-releases. And it was basically just a matchmaking service where someone would have a press release. I would send it to who I thought were the right journalist, and it worked really well. And my costs were really low compared to what a newswire was. And over time, a little more than 10 years ago, PR Newswire reached out to me and said, hey, you should also send through us in addition to your email distribution. And I pointed out that you charge $1,500 to move a press release nationally. And I didn't think my clients would be able to afford it. And they liked that I was servicing small businesses, entrepreneurs, businesses that are just, from a side business to a franchise, or just, in general, anything, under a couple of $1 million a year in revenue. And so they made the pricing work. So now all releases that go out through e-releases go out nationally through PR Newswire as well. And that also includes the appropriate industry categories. And you can also, saturate locally as well. So it's been a really, interesting path how I got here. But, the one thing that I noticed was I saw a huge opportunity that wasn't being taken. And I still see that largely 80% of the releases that I get at e-releases aren't meaningful press releases. They're not strategic enough. And, people aren't being creative when it comes to what they should be writing about. And so my mission is to educate my customers, which I've been doing, and trying to get them to pay more attention to the types of releases they could be doing. So many of the releases we get are, a personnel change at the company or a product launch that's just, here's the product, here's a list of features. And it's very difficult for a journalist to write an article because there's no story there. And you really have to feed the elements of a story to a journalist. In the example of a product launch press release, add a case study, a user that used your product. What were their results? Have a quote by them. All of a sudden, the product launch can be built out into more of a story arc, which journalists like to do. And it really fulfills a lot more of what they're looking to get to their audience, which are, readers and consumers of news and content.
Well, thanks for giving that example too, because that was going to be the next thought that I was going to ask you was, well, you're saying people aren't being very creative. What should they be putting into a press release? So, thanks for at least giving that example as well. And if we have time, maybe we can go into a couple more. But I would love for you first to just talk about how can these press releases even increase visibility for businesses? I think we often think it's like the big companies that are putting something out there, but how can we as small businesses incorporate them also into a marketing strategy?
Right. So the first thing that I have to tell people is journalists don't like to profile large companies. Everyone's going to cover Microsoft and Google. It's just the nature of their size. But they know that a large business that has a new product coming out can certainly afford to pay for advertising. And so they feel less of a need to cover it. They like to cover the undiscovered places because journalists like to be seen as curators. And for that reason, the smaller you are and the more unknown you are, is an advantage when it comes to getting media attention. So, do not underestimate the power of being small and unknown and, seem like you're not worthy of getting PR. When it comes to, what happens when someone reads an article about you, it's like a third-party corroboration. It's like social proof. A journalist has written about you. I'm guilty of this. I read a great article about a Kickstarter, and next thing I know, I've got my credit card out and I'm supporting this great cause. And the truth is, I didn't open a link to a new window and see if I could find a similar product on Amazon. I got this warm feeling of reading this article and I wanted to do business with these people. I wanted to support this cause. And that's what happens with PR. And so when you get media attention, the customers that you generally get from that are very loyal customers and they want to do business with you. They're not looking for the best price, or if they can find something that, maybe fulfills some of what you have, they really want to support you. And as a result, if you take that same article and then put it in front of your existing customers, they're going to have a really good feeling as well. And maybe each year, a certain percentage of your customers shop just to see if they're with the right company. And maybe this year they feel they don't have to. Like this article is proof that we're with the right company. Same thing with leads. So you put that link in front of your leads on your social media, and there are people who are always on the fence that you're going to lose. Like maybe the percentage was you didn't get them over the 50% mark, but you got them to 48%. Maybe getting that article in front of them and having them read it would get them to the 52% mark or the 53% mark where they decide, this is the company we go with. And so these are all the type of amazing things that happen with PR, not just the people that you get naturally from the article, but the fact that you can then use that article and get it out there to other people. I had one offline client, a carpet company in New Jersey, that just dominated in their industry trade publications. And the interesting thing, as I pointed out, was we're getting a lot of great, pickup in floor covering trade publications, but your customers aren't reading these. And they're just like, we know what we're doing. And so towards the end of a 1-year campaign we did with them and got about 30 articles, they put together what they called a brag book. And they started whenever they gave a quote to someone in their home, they would show them, here we are profiled in Floor Trade Weekly. Here we are in, Floor Coverings Today, all of these national publications, as well as a local newspaper and New Jersey Magazine. And they started converting about 14% more of those leads than previously just by introducing that brag book. And, that's a statistical proof, that getting this stuff can really help you, even if it's just in passing. They said they literally spent no more than a minute thumbing through the book to show them where they had pickup before. And so it's a very valuable sales tool because it really does, give you the authority and credibility that you're looking for out there in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it sounds like, too, from the story you said about Kickstarter, too, it grabbed your emotion, too. It wasn't just some facts, right? And so I would love for you maybe to just give our listeners like some of those essential elements that you do need to have in there. Obviously, you need to have some of the facts about what's going on, but what is the type of information that should be put into a press release to convey the message and grab the attention of the audience?
Right. So I think that the most important thing is that you have a hook. What's the most important element of the press release? And you want to sort of make it something that you feel this is going to be relevant to a journalist audience, because that's what a journalist is looking for, is to find something that interests or educates or gives to their audience in a way that they'll appreciate. And so, when it comes to, getting your message out, it's being concise and powerful, but having enough elements for them to build out into an article. Generally, it's 400 to 600 words. You're going to have an amazing quote in your press release, because what you don't realize is if you have an amazing quote, a journalist can build a story around that. So what do I mean by an amazing quote? It varies. So it could be like you said something very powerfully, or you said something that was just really concise and succinct. It could be the flourish, the creativity of how you said it. There's lots of different approaches to how you can have an amazing quote. But basically, at the end of the day, you want it to be that if a journalist was to paraphrase what you wrote, there would be a loss. It could be a loss of art or a loss of energy or power or pizzazz. And so you really just want to spend a little bit more attention with the quote that you have in a press release, because if your quote survives, you and your company's mention will survive, because they always mention who said it and the relevance of who, where they are, the company. So that's a really great way to sort of stand out. Other things to look out for when doing a press release are, we know that journalists like facts, but they also really love data. So anytime that you can introduce numbers into your article or press release, it gives you an edge. So let's say you have a new product, maybe point out some of the challenges in your industry. There's probably publicly available data in your industry about certain subjects. You could say, hey, 57% of people in my industry deal with, logistics nightmares. And, by using our product, we've solved that. And, so all of a sudden, any data or numbers that you have can work really well. Also, for that reason, when I have clients that come to me and just say, press releases don't work, I've never had them work for me, I need a press release that works, I can give them one. I have one that has never failed to get earned media. And when I say earned media, what we're talking about is an article written about you by a journalist. Whenever a press release goes out, it gets syndicated on a few websites, but it's the press release replicated on a few websites. What you're looking for is an article that has been written from the ground up by the journalist. And so in the case of the press release that has never failed, it's to do a survey or study within your industry. Take that survey, figure out what were the 2 or 3 biggest aha moments from it, and build that into a story in a press release and get that out to the media. It usually generates between 6 and 14 articles every time a client has done this. The least we've ever had is 4 articles. And that's a pretty good return on investment, because, there are PR firms that charge many thousands of dollars a month, and they don't offer any guarantee of any media pickup. And I'm just
Hmm.
like, just do this one and you will get media pickup. I do get pushback from clients because they feel it's like too much work. But, you can build a survey in Survey Monkey in under 5 minutes. It's
Hmm.
very simple. You want to spend a little bit of quality time thinking about what are questions that are relevant right now. The best questions aren't evergreen questions. They're questions of what is my industry facing right now? And, it could be, hiring, labor issues, or, people
Hmm.
resistant to come back to work in the office after a pandemic, or people, not wanting to do the job. They're wanting to do something else. Are they looking for a different kind of balance? Are you having, the opposite problem where you're facing the potential of a layoff?
Hmm.
Are there indicators in your industry that the might be heading towards a recession? Are you spending more in the next couple of quarters or less in marketing? Think questions like that. Think of the things that you would ask when you go to a trade conference or something like that, or an event where you're just with other colleagues, so-called competitors in other markets or the same market, and you're just sitting around the water cooler asking them, hey, have you noticed something? And it could be as simple and benign as, have you noticed that everyone's taking a lot longer to pay than usual? I have. And, that could be a sign that money is drying up in your industry. And so these are all types of questions you can ask. I think, brainstorm, spend a little quality time, ask others, what are some hotbed questions you would ask right now in your industry? And then just ask it. The next pushback I get is, I don't have enough people in my Rolodex to send out a survey. You don't need to. There are dozens, if not in some cases hundreds, of trade associations, and these associations are in every industry. And so just contact an independent or local trade association, or maybe one that's not the big one. I find that
Hmm.
the smaller and independent of these associations are much more likely to do a collaboration with a survey than the large trade associations. They don't get the media attention of the large ones. So as a result, when
Hmm.
you approach them and say, hey, could you just send this link to your members? In exchange, I'll mention you in a press release I'll be issuing over the wire. So they see it as a win-win opportunity. I've had a few that say, hey, could we co-brand the survey so they get a little more attention? I don't see a
Hmm.
problem with that. And then often they'll share it on social media or email. Often, they'll do both. And really, you only need like 150 responses for it to be somewhat statistically relevant that a journalist is interested in it. And, and like I said, it can seem daunting, but it doesn't have to be. And it's something that if
Hmm.
you just approach in a very logical way, you can get to the results of it, and you want to cover every question that you asked in the survey. Most surveys that I coach have about 16 questions in them, 4 questions per page. So if someone left halfway through the survey, you got 8 responses from that. And I usually front load the most important questions first. Then you pick what were the two or three questions that mattered most, were the biggest surprises. Take all of the responses and put them on a page on your website, all dedicated to the survey. And when you do the press release, link to that, because sometimes you'll have
Hmm.
a really creative journalist go there and realize that the story they want to write is questions that you didn't focus on in the press release. And so have a resource page on your website dedicated to that survey where you list all the results and all of the things. And so if you notice a trend where you've gotten a couple of articles written that weren't the focus of the press release, maybe you need to do a second press release for this survey. And so it's really interesting. It's all about tweaking and learning and trying to give journalists what they want. And what they really want is a story. And
Hmm.
so I think that data is one of the more magical ways to get a story and allow a journalist to build something out. The quotes that you're going to have in that type of press release are ones where you're going to comment on the data and why it's skewed a particular way. Remember, you're now the expert. You're the one issuing the survey. And so you're going to have an amazing quote that you're going to put in there. And that's going to, make sure that you're included in that article front and center.
Well, and earlier you were saying, if you just say like, oh, we have a product release and there's like nothing else kind of in there to make a story, that could be a problem, obviously. But are there other mistakes maybe that business owners are making, that they're kind of putting things in maybe that they shouldn't, or, kind of what are the things they shouldn't do? Like you talked about the things they should. What are some of the things they shouldn't do then?
Well, I find that a lot of small businesses like to appear extremely professional, and they forget the personal story. They don't realize that journalists often like the human interest element. If you watch Shark Tank, one of the first things they do is they have them tell their story of why they started
Mhm.
this company, or why they started this product, or why they're offering a service. And it's often their personal story. Sometimes it's a vulnerability, something that happened, maybe an illness that they suffered, or something that
Mhm.
they got laid off from a job. And there's a reason that they're coached to begin with that, and it's because it helps to bring this human interest element that's so natural. It's so natural to the story. It's so natural to us. We want to relate not to products. We want to relate to people. And
Mhm.
so, make sure you include that. I had one customer who shared a really embarrassing story where for Thanksgiving, the whole family had to go to the warehouse and load up boxes to ship out because they got inundated with orders. And I told them we should include that in the press release. And they were resistant, but we did. And it was the introduction to a 2-page article that Inc. magazine did on them. And
Mhm.
they just couldn't believe that that was what Inc. magazine was interested in. And there's a reason Inc. magazine likes to tell stories of entrepreneurs and people who are going through obstacles and challenges that they've overcome. And we all relate to it as other business owners and things like that. So it really is something that humanizes the story and gives you an entry into it. And I think that anything that you can do in a press release to allow for that is going to do really well. And I think
Mhm.
that other things that have worked really well are what are blind spots in your industry. And what I mean by that are, what are the things that the industry doesn't really talk about. And yet every time you're with colleagues, you sort of say, hey, we've got this problem. Everybody's saying going green, but we're all using these products. They're just not good for us. It's hurting, labor problems, or it takes more of a certain resource, and how is that energy efficient. So sometimes these things can be something that you can flesh out and put into a press release and send out to the media. I've had those work really well for a lot of my clients. It does require a little bit more brainstorming and coordinating with others in your industry to sort of think about what are the things that your industry isn't doing a good job reporting on. And those are really great opportunities. And also, think about you as an expert. Maybe it's towards the end of the year, you're doing predictions for the coming year, or maybe you do a top 10 list of something. I've had this work really well, where someone is doing a podcast and they talk about the top 10 podcast in their market, and they include themselves. And there are
Mhm.
busy journalists who are just looking for content, and all of a sudden they see that it's a very easy copy and paste for them, and they've got content that they can put out there. And so don't discount the copy and paste element of having something ready made for journalists to utilize.
Mhm. Well, that's one thing I was thinking of while you were talking too, is if journalists are finding this information and they're writing articles, like, are they just taking that information, maybe doing a little bit more research and then just putting out their story? Or do they reach out to the business and actually have an interview? Like, what does that look like once they get the information that they're putting into like a story?
Right. So the majority of them work with what's on the press release and on the website. They will on occasion ask for more information or to get a quote on a different topic, but that's rare.
Mhm.
And to be able to do an interview on top of that, they're expected to do 8 to 12 articles a day. They just can't fit in 8 to 12 interviews with people. It's just not attainable. So having as much information as you can in the press release and on your website is going to give you a huge advantage. If a journalist is having to hunt down content that wasn't there, it's going to mean that they probably will just move on to a different story that just has easier accessibility of all the information that they need.
Well, and I know earlier I believe you said like around 300 to 400 words would be the minimum. Is there like a maximum length as well?
I usually say 600 words, but I have seen releases that are longer that needed to be longer. But they're generally, companies that have to release information like they're publicly traded, and they just have to get certain information out that are longer like that. I think that, 98% of all press releases that I see should be under 600 words, and anything more you're getting a little verbose. Remember, you can also always link to a web page if you have more information, especially if you're a product launch. You'll have a page dedicated to the product and more information. So you don't necessarily have to repeat everything that's on that page, but it's good to have a resource for them to go to if they needed more information. Certainly include links to your website, where they can find out more about your company, about you. If you have a newsroom, that's even great. It's where they can go back and look at past releases that you've issued and things like that. But even if you don't, a lot of my customers they don't have a dedicated newsroom. Maybe they have a blog, having that on your website can be a great resource as well for them to go and look at content that you've issued and sort of where you're coming from.
Perfect. Well, any other takeaway that you would want to share on this topic with our audience that I didn't know to ask you a question about?
I think that, one of the things to, I guess, keep in mind is that there's lots of different ways in which to interact with the media. If you look around and see the types of releases that other people in your industry are doing, it's probably like the worst example to do, because like I said, the majority of press releases that I get at e-releases aren't newsworthy. They often look like releases that other people have issued in their industry, and they just feel a need to issue something similar. And as a result, and over time, you have a lot of people issuing very mediocre press releases that don't really generate anything, but they all look very similar. So they're all, well written for the most part, press releases, but they're just not getting any media pickup. So I would strive for people to be a little more strategic with what they're looking to announce, trying to solve the story arc with whatever you are issuing. Try to find win-wins, but where, maybe your goal is to sell a new product that you've launched, but you also have to recognize that you have to include enough information for the journalist to build a story. And, maybe that, like I said, could be a case study, quotes from a customer who has used you, as well as, data that you've, culled that's publicly available that just sort of defines the marketplace that you're in and what you solve. All that can really help you. Also, candid photos can work as well, having a couple of those with your press release. I find that the stock photos don't work as well, especially for small businesses and entrepreneurs. So, everybody has a great phone with a camera on it. Feel free to use something like that. You don't have to go and get something that's really extremely professional or anything along those lines. Infographics can also work well with the media. So, don't discount, the visual element, because journalists are putting more of these articles that they write online. And if you have some photos or infographics to add to it, that really gives you an edge when they're determining what press release they should focus on and develop into a story.
Perfect. Well, I would love to ask if you have an offer that you would like to extend to our listeners, and if they have more questions, how to connect with you.
Okay. So my website is ereleases.com. We have chat there, phone, email, lots of different ways to interact with us. We only have editors. We have no salespeople. There's no commissions or anything like that. And we'll gladly walk anybody through their first press release. We realize that it could be really daunting task, and we try to break it down and make it very easy for anyone. I do have a free video masterclass. It's about an hour long, and it goes through the strategic types of releases that are meaningful and are more likely to get media pickup. So I think it's a great place for anybody to start because it can really give you an edge as to what types of releases you should be focusing on when you build out a PR campaign. And it's available at ereleases.com/plan, PLAN. And again, it's completely free. It's one of my educational outreaches to try and get my customers to be doing more meaningful types of releases and avoiding those that just don't get media pickup.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Mickie, for being a guest on my show. I think this has been an informative discussion, and I really enjoyed the conversation. So thanks so much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in today. I hope you found this topic interesting and enjoyed the informative discussion. Would you please share my show with those you know and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform? I'd really appreciate your support. If you have any additional questions or comments, be sure to reach out to my guest at any of the links that they shared, or you could send me a message at media@abandp.com. I hope you can join me for my next interview, and remember, you can connect with me on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and my website is abandp.com. This episode is sponsored by Affordable Bookkeeping and Payroll Services. If you are overwhelmed trying to handle the financial aspects of your business, ABandP is here to help. Contact us today to discuss your needs at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.